What is up, Waffle Gang? I do hope you are well. My name is Mark, and today we're covering some more r/am I the butthole. If you'd like to skip the initial waffle, timestamps are in the description and along the timeline below. But if you are new here, please consider hitting that like, that subscribe, and maybe that notification bell too. And just a huge thank you to each and every one of you for taking the time out of your day to be here. Incredible. Thank you so much. It really does mean the world to me. So, let's just get on with today's stories. Much love, guys. Now, our first story comes from a throwaway account. Am I the arsehole for telling our son that if he dropped out of school, he has 6 months to move out? This evening, my husband, 42 male, and I, 40 female, got into an argument with our 17-year-old son. He told us at dinner that he needs our signatures to drop out of school. We know that he's been struggling since remote learning started last year. We've worked closely with the school to develop an IEP, and he goes to therapy 3 times per week. His school has implemented everything that his therapist recommended, including reduced assignments, more time on tests, and frequent breaks during lectures. I have even cut my hours down to part-time at work so I can be at home to help him when needed. He told us that if we won't sign the paperwork, that as soon as he turns 18 in May, he will sign the forms himself and drop out. My husband asked what plans he had if he were to drop out, such as work, living situation and transportation, and he said he was going to stay here so he wouldn't have to worry about any of that. We both told him that if he dropped out of school that he would not be living here, that he would have 6 months in which he would need to find a job, place to live and his own transportation to get back and forth from work. We told him that if he's going to make the adult decision to discontinue his education, that he would need to be able to support himself because we would not be doing that. My husband and Mason know several people who are looking for apprentices in HVAC and as an electrician. But our son says he doesn't want to do that kind of work. He says he wants to make his living as an influencer because he can't work for other people. We told our son that our decision stands, that at this time he has 3 choices: graduate, get a job, and go to college, graduate and work a trade or leave. Our son called us both stupid arseholes and told us we don't understand that he doesn't want to work like dad. Am I the arsehole for telling our son that if he drops out of school, he has 6 months to move out? Damn, I think you're absolutely right to do what you're doing in this particular scenario. You know, you've tried that, you're going through therapy, you've done everything you can to support this man in the fact that, you know, you've gone to part-time to support him with school, you've got therapy sessions for him, there's loads going on, and he's still ungrateful of all of that. And your husband, who's a mason, said he could get him a job as an electrician. That's a great profession to have. I would have loved that opportunity. I can't because I'm colorblind anyway, but I would have loved that opportunity to be an electrician at a stage. I always wanted a trade growing up, and to have something like that offered you on a plate, you know, that is an amazing opportunity. But he's not taking it, and you know, I think you did totally the right thing in the situation. But Purple Glitter Kitty says, not the arsehole. It seems like you and your husband have been very diligent in working with his therapist and his school to get him the services he needs. I encourage you to call his therapist and let them know that he's talking about dropping out of school. If there is anything that can be done to prevent him from dropping out, that will be for his benefit. I get that he thinks this influencer lifestyle is glamorous, but it is not sustainable. If he doesn't want to go to college, the trades are awesome. They are hard work, the pay is garbage as an apprentice, but it will pay off. My husband is a master electrician and makes more than me with 2 college degrees. If your son does decide to drop out, 6 months is more than enough to get his ducks in a row. Stand firm and do not back down. Not the arsehole, and if we wanted to work physically demanding jobs all the time, they wouldn't have to pay us. Oh, and lol, making his living as an influencer. Lol. Oh dear. And Unpredictable says, not the arsehole, you are giving him options. This is where he will learn the truth about being an adult. And Desolate Construct says, not the arsehole, I'm all for wanting to live a traditional life, or just go to college then work pipeline. Trades are fantastic, especially if you have some hookups, so to say. People who can get you in with good people to learn from. Apprenticeships are difficult, but in the long run, from people I know who have apprenticed, they are very lucrative and can afford a great life. That said, it seems like you and your husband and your school have been very flexible and accommodating during this tough time. Seems like he isn't an interest in putting in his part. At the end of the day, he's 17, he's not thinking long term and doesn't have a concept of what it takes to live on his own. I was a big-headed 17-year-old once too. I hope you give him some time to cool down and maybe talk about some options. But don't think for 1 second that being realistic with him is doing him a disservice. He needs to be told about the reality of adult life. Now, what would you do in this situation if you was OP and your child was going to make these decisions? Would you give him this ultimatum too, or would you go down a different path? Let us know in the comments below. Now, our next story comes from Lake Life. Am I the arsehole for not sharing my inheritance with my cousins? My paternal grandparents died in a car accident when I was a child. In their will, they left their house, a lakefront cabin, to their grandchildren. At the time, that was just me. My parents had barely hung on to their own house in the recession and didn't trust the stock market, so they turned the cabin into a rental. The plan was that when I went to college, I could sell it for hopefully a higher price, plus have whatever rental income it had made. It was a good choice. By the time I graduated high school, the cabin had made enough to pay for almost 2/3 of tuition. I decided that rather than sell it, I'd use student loans and pay them off with future rental income. I'm a junior now, and if things keep on as they are, I will pay off the loans 2 years after I graduate. The trouble started a year ago when my paternal aunt married a man with 2 teenage sons. They'd used the cabin a few times before the marriage, as I always let family use it, but after they started going monthly, I tried to be patient because I knew COVID was making us all stir crazy, but their visits made it difficult for me to sanitize the cabin. We started having quibbles over when they could go. Then I went to prep for a new client and I found a mess, one made after I cleaned up from my last guest. The keypad logs showed my aunt's code. She had not told me her family would be there. I called her to ask why she hadn't asked to use the cabin or cleaned up, and she said we should talk in person. My parents and I go to her backyard, social distancing and all, and she made my cousins apologise for leaving the cabin a mess. They revealed they were there alone, and I told them that can't happen. No one under 18 can stay in the cabin unsupervised, per the rental license. Rather than address this, she told me she was very frustrated with how I treated the family cabin like it was mine alone. It was for all the grandchildren, so her sons now owned 1/3 each. I almost passed out, but my parents jumped in and told her no, that's not how inheritance worked. They had specifically asked the estate lawyer about this, and she said that the beneficiaries had a time limit to claim their inheritance, and once it was distributed, it was final. The cabin was mine alone, legally. My aunt freaked out and said I was being greedy. Grandma and Grandpa wanted us to share, and I should teach my cousins the business so that the cabin could pay for their college too. It became a big fight and my uncle asked us to leave. Now I'm very torn. On the one hand, I love my cabin and I worked really hard to build my business. At this point I handle all bookings, cleaning and maintenance. But on the other hand, if my grandparents had died today instead of over a decade ago, my cousins would have a share. So am I standing up for myself by keeping the cabin, or am I being a greedy asshole? And I think the main thing here is that the inheritance, it's been settled, it's done. They had their time to claim if they wanted to, they didn't. So this is how inheritance works. You can't just suddenly turn around and say, this is what they would have wanted, so now we're having a part of it. It just doesn't work like that. And regardless, would your grandpa and grandma looked at it that way? I mean, they're not biological children. They've came in since this has all happened, right? So you can't just bring in children and say, oh yeah, now they're part of this inheritance too. Even though it's been settled already. Just doesn't work like that. They're the ones that's being greedy assholes in this situation for suddenly stepping up and saying, they're claiming the inheritance. But Terry says, not the arsehole, your parents are correct. That is entirely your cabin. Change the locks on the cabin and no longer allow your aunt or a family access. They're trying to take something of yours which they have absolutely no right. Also, your aunt gave her code to her stepsons so they could party at your cabin without adult supervision. You need to respond by blocking their access. Toxic Dollhouse says, lol, not the arsehole, your parents are right. That's not how it works and you have no blood relation to them, therefore no legal obligation ×2. You don't even know if your grandparents would have given them the inheritance. For all you know, they could have only wanted the cabin to stay in blood relative family. Don't give them a damn thing. B-Tink says, not the arsehole, absolutely not greedy at all. Your parents are correct in stating that is how inheritance works, meaning it's settled at the time probate is closed. Greedy is what your new step-siblings are being. Don't feel bad and just tell them, nice try. Martini Girl 2004 says, they're not familiar to your grandparents, the husband came with the kids. Would be completely different if they were your aunt's biological children. Change the code to the security system fast or they might just move in. Now, what would you do in this situation? Do you think OP is greedy for what they're doing? Or do you think the step siblings are greedy for what they're doing and the aunt? Let us know in the comments below. I picked this next story because I like the look of it. This next story is from Short Substance. Am I the arsehole for counting out my chicken at KFC? So last night my family decided we want to eat some fried chicken. My oldest son's girlfriend was staying with us, so 6 people in total. We wanted to get it delivered, but the wait times were too long, so we decided to drive over with my daughter. We decided to get a bucket with 24 pieces, so 4 bits of chicken for each of us. We'd share the fries and we had drinks at home. We get there in order, and as I'm waiting for my food, I realise this is a branch we've had issues with before. For example, we order large and they give us a medium, or we get normal fries instead of spicy, so I decided to count the bits of chicken in the bucket as the KFC woman was putting them in. There were 21 pieces. When I said there were only 21 in the bucket instead of 24, she insisted that was the full amount and I was mistaken. I assured her I was not. The manager overheard us and backed the employee and said it looked like there were 24 pieces in the bucket and handed it to me. At this point I took out those disposable plates, I laid them on the counter and counted 21, not 24 chicken pieces. I then said I either want my 3 pieces or a refund because this is not what I had paid for. The manager apologised and ended up giving us 3 extra, so 6 more in total. My daughter was mortified about the whole thing and said I was being a total Karen. I disagree because I had a valid complaint and the staff wouldn't even consider. I think it's better I sorted it at the store than when I got home, then someone went without because there weren't enough pieces. That someone would have been me or my wife, seeing as we're the adults and I didn't particularly want to go hungry. My kids agreed that I was being dramatic and that 3 pieces weren't worth arguing over, and my name in the family group is now Karen. My wife agrees with me, saying I was only asking what I paid for. Now, this is what annoys me, Karen gets overused now too much. At first it was all about like entitled people, just people being overly entitled about things, but in this case you're just asking what you paid for and you're being talked down to, saying like, no, you must have counted it wrong basically. So I think you did totally the right thing to call these people out. Even the manager needed to be called out in the situation. Now, if you started screaming and shouting about it, maybe I would call you a Karen, but you are not. You're totally entitled to the food you paid for. When me and my dad used to order a lot of takeaway and stuff, we used to have every Friday, we used to have our takeaway Friday, and we used to order KFC sometimes, and we used to get it through Deliveroo or Just Eat or whatever, and always, every single time with our local KFC, there'd be mistakes. Either missing chicken pieces or missing fries. One day, they sent us no fries at all, and when we phoned them up, they said, oh, they could refund the fries. And it's like, well, so we ended up with like half a meal in the end. We didn't get our fries with our chicken. I was so pissed off that day because you want the fries with the chicken. You don't just want one or the other. Would they have done the same if they just sent the fries and not the chicken? Don't get me started on the KFC. Bloody great food, but one of the worst customer service I've ever experienced. Don't call me a Karen. But Boonby says, not the arsehole. People say Karen for anything now. Asking for what you've paid for isn't being a Karen. I'm only saying this as a millennial myself, but tell your kids it's okay to be a customer. Just don't be a jerk about it, and it's okay to speak up. I know my generation and younger get nervous about that kind of stuff, but it is your money and you should get what you paid for. You noticed a mistake, pointed it out, kindly from what I read, and it was fixed. Not the arsehole, your daughter needs to grasp that a customer is entitled to everything they pay for. I wonder how your children ended up in a state where they feel people must comply even when they know they're being cheated. This needs addressing. The Ultradian Cyclist says, not the arsehole, that's a scam that could make the manager some cash if they didn't get caught. I wonder how long they've been getting away with it. Did you take the matter up further at the ladder? Jennifer says, thanks for taking one for the team. If nobody did this, everyone will be getting 21 pieces, then 20, then 19. And they got off lightly, I think, only giving you 3 extra pieces. Not the arsehole. And Tracy Minnow B says, that's a normal practice by more places than you think. It lowers their food cost. Not the arsehole. Ask your kids how they'd like paying for a tank of gas and not getting 12.5% of what they paid for. Or working a job for 40 hours and only getting paid for 35. Now, what would you do in this situation? Do you think OP was right to call them out on it? Do you think they was a Karen? Let me know in the comments below. And our next story is from Old Bullfrog. Am I the arsehole for letting my stepson get evicted and become homeless because I refuse to pay for his outstanding back rent? So I have a stepson, 26 male, with my husband of 7 years. After college, he moved to NYC to work in marketing. He has lived in an apartment with two of his partners, paying around 1.2k a month, but starting in June, July, they have stopped paying all rent. They thought they could get away with it because of the eviction moratorium during the pandemic. Even though he was still earning an income, and one of his partners, lawyer, was a high earner who could have easily afforded the rent each month. Nonetheless, he told us they weren't paying rent because he was convinced the government would cancel rent before the end of the year. Unsurprisingly, their landlord has been going nuts and is now threatening to sue them for back rent and evict them starting next year. It's not looking like any rent will be cancelled, and Stepson's high earning partner also left them suddenly and is now unreachable. So he is freaking out and wants us to cover the amount they owe on rent, about 6k. I am fuming. They claim they've spent this money already and have nothing in savings. He's coming to us begging for money because he says he'll be evicted and homeless in the middle of winter otherwise. My husband has a soft spot and wants to loan this money, knowing we'll never get it back realistically. I'm less lenient and have been pushing back. However, stepson has gotten the sense that I'm the resistant one and has blown up at his dad, accusing him of putting his spouse over his children. I am stuck in the middle and I'm wondering if it's easier just to give in than to keep fighting. Husband and I are both high earners and can afford this rent bailout, but I honestly am just sick of endorsing stepson's wasteful life decisions. Am I the arsehole for not wanting to pay stepson's back rent, thus letting him get evicted and possibly sued starting next year? So let me get this right, they actually had the money at one point to pay for this rent, but they've refused to because they thought the government was just going to cancel it, so they were going to save a lot of money that way. How selfish and entitled can you be? And also screwing over the landlord at the same time. It's just awful behaviour all around, and I can't blame you for wanting to say no to this. He needs to learn a lesson somewhere, right? He needs to pay this rent back. But Noz says, not the arsehole, what a shitty, selfish group of individuals. Good for you for holding your ground on this. They deserve every second of stress this causes. Not good happy Quinn says, no, not the arsehole. He had the money to pay for rent and he decided to just not pay. What the hell did he imagine would happen? The consequences of not paying rent are not having a home. Bailing him out won't help. It's not like he got into trouble because he couldn't afford it, lost his job, had a big emergency to pay for like hospital bills. He just decided to not pay. He's an arsehole. Amarin says, not the arsehole, he did this to himself. They should have paid the rent since they were all working. It's not up to you or your spouse to fix this. You guys should let him deal with the consequences, even if he becomes homeless. Bing and Bong 123 says, not the arsehole. He got himself into this through his dumbass choices. If you want to be a good guy while still teaching him some kind of lesson, it is possible for you to offer him a place to stay if he does get evicted, or to loan him money in a formal way with a contract, to pay back an agreed upon date. $6,000 is a lot of money to expect your parents to hand to you with no conditions because you've been an idiot who refused to pay your own rent. And so Rock says, not the arsehole to be honest. If I were the landlord, and I am one, albeit reluctantly, paying the arrears this late in the day wouldn't be enough to stop me trying to get your stepson out the first chance I could anyway. There is this idea that all landlords are rich and looking to screw over their tenants. In the case of my family, we had a house with steep stairs, a child with severe disabilities, and a mortgage for more than the house was worth due to the last financial case. We had to move to a bungalow for our son, but couldn't clear the mortgage if we sold, so we had to rent the house out. Our last tenants didn't pay the last month's rent and trashed the place. We had to borrow money from our parents to pay the mortgage. If they were 6 months without paying, we'd be absolutely screwed. What your son and his partner did was so spectacularly stupid. It could have led to the landlord defaulting on the mortgage and the bank repossessing their home. Even if some of their rent was written off, did they honestly think that would happen without any effect on their credit score, or that they would never need good references to apply for future rentals? I wouldn't want to see your stepson sleeping on the streets because that is far too difficult to recover from, but I'd want to see him try a whole lot harder to sort his own mess before stepping in to bail him out. And absolutely true. And we got like a program, I've mentioned these programs before on this channel about, I think they call them nightmare tenants on our channels. And whilst there is like a lot of nightmare landlords out there too, who are absolutely trying to screw people over, the majority of them are just trying to earn their way, you know. And a lot of the cases we see on these nightmare tenants is that they do absolutely trash their house before they leave. They rip plumbing off the walls, rip out electricity boxes and all that sort of stuff. And it just costs them so much money to replace this, and you can see why it's just not worth it being a landlord sometimes. So not the arsehole in this case, and yeah, like you said, I think I'd want him to learn his lesson in some way or another. But how would you deal with it? What would you do to the son? How would you make him pay for what he's done? Let me know in the comments below. Now, once again, guys, thank you for being here today. I hope you did enjoy today's stories. And if you did, you know what to do. Hit that like, that subscribe, and maybe that notification bell too. Don't forget, we've got merch, which is down now in the link in the description. Some of you have been ordering already, and I'm really excited to see it. And we've got stickers coming soon as well, which I'm making. I'm hoping to have them by the weekend, but we shall see. We shall see. You know what I'm like. Always busy, always busy. But once again, thank you for being here today, guys, and I will see you in the next one. Take care, guys. Much love.